You know, sometimes when you're just at home, chilling, studying up on your spells, drinking butterbeer, getting your wand ready just in case you know who decides to return. Yes, I am rewatching the entire series of Harry Potter films, and I have to say it's one of my favorite film franchises of all time. And I'm honestly really sad because I'm about to end the entire film franchise today. By the time I upload this video, I probably will have already watched the entire series. It's sad to think that we're not getting any other Harry Potter films. We are getting some spin-offs here and there, but anyways, that's beyond the point. I was sitting there chilling, scrolling through my YouTube feed, and I ran across this article posted by a number of different people, but personally, I actually ran into it because of Toy Shiz, so really big shout out to him. He's always got like the really cool pre-orders, and he's always got the really cool like article snippets of like breaking news going on in the action figure community. So if you guys haven't heard officially, or I guess unofficially or officially, I'm not sure, but Mattel is supposed to regain the rights to be able to make DC Collectibles in the year of 2026. Now, nothing is confirmed, and we don't have any like realistic details here. There are a lot of different theories floating around, and to me, there are essentially three different possibilities here. Okay, number one being that both McFarland and Mattel are able to make DC Collectibles in their own scale. McFarland stays within the 7-inch line with the 1/10 scale, and then Mattel goes back to what they were doing a few years ago, where they do the 1/12 scale, the 1/12 scale DC Collectibles. So that's definitely a possibility. The second option here being that Mattel is able to gain a little subline from McFarland, maybe like a smaller, like a 5-inch line with very minimal articulation, just something simplistic that they can throw up on their resume. Or the third option, which to me sounds the more plausible. I will say the last two are more plausible. The one where Mattel is able to pick up a subline from McFarlane. And then the last one being, to me, the one that has the most possibility of happening, and that is McFarlane just outright losing the license to be able to make DC Collectibles, or at least most of the DC Collectibles. We're not sure if he's going to be able to keep the right to like maybe make statues and things of that nature, which I think there's a very good possibility that he keeps like the DC Direct statues around, because that's what he loves. He's always jizzing over statues and being able to make them. We know he's already doing the Marvel statues, and that opens up a plethora of different possibilities for McFarlane, what he could do after the DC Multiverse line. So I think that's a video for another day. Today, we're just going to focus in on those three options. And as I said, I think both of them, being able to make simultaneously, being able to make DC Collectibles at a very similar scale. Like, I know 1/10 and 1/12 scale for like hardened seasoned collectors, we can tell the difference for the most part, even like on a store shelf, or in somebody's collection, you can clearly go like, oh, that's a Mattel DC Multiverse action figure, or that's a McFarlane DC Multiverse action figure. But at the end of the day, most people, like kids or their adults or parents, are not really going to be able to tell the difference. They're just going to assume that they already have a Batman action figure. But I just don't think that's going to happen. There's going to be too much crossover. They're competing against each other. As I said, mostly with parents or people that are like casual collectors. They're not really going to be able to tell the difference. And there's no way McFarlane and Mattel are going to want to butt heads consistently. Like, who gets the opportunity to make movie DC Multiverse action figures first? Is it McFarlane or is it Mattel? And so there's just no way that they can coexist with each other in that format. I think the two strongest possibilities here is that Mattel picks up a subline from McFarlane, which is like, in my mind, like a 15% chance of happening. And then the other 85% is pretty clear cut. McFarlane is going to be cut off from like the DC Multiverse line, the Collector's Edition line. Like, this is the end of the road for McFarlane DC action figures. And I will say, a lot of us saw this coming from like years ago. A lot of us have been speculating this for many years about a lot of the big manufacturers potentially losing the right to make action figures based on certain franchises, and this is just a perfect example of it. We know that for some unknown reason, McFarlane just loves making statues. He's not about action figures, doesn't really care about the DC Multiverse as much as he does the other little sublines that he's been working on, whether it was the DC Direct line, the Page Punchers line. I think he started to kind of show a little bit of love for the Collector's Edition line, but for the most part, he didn't really care too much about it. This McFarland started off as a comic book creator and then eventually went on to making action figures, but it was mostly for his own franchise. It was for Spawn. And as time progressed, as time went by, a lot of companies saw that there was some potential for McFarland to work on their product, but you've always been able to tell that he just doesn't feel as passionate about the DC multiverse or DC collectibles as a whole. I remember seeing a lot of these live streams where either McFarland was just there hanging out with content creators or like legitimately making announcements for certain reveals, and he just didn't really seem to be too interested in it. He didn't seem passionate. He didn't seem as intrigued talking about like DC collectibles as he was with his Spawn universe. And it's not so much that he's an action figure creator, he's just a content creator. Like, he created a great comic book series. It's probably one of the best comic book series out there. And from there, it kind of stemmed out. Then he started making action figures. He started making statues. He started making other products based on his own franchise. It wasn't that he necessarily wanted to make action figures. He just started to make merchandising where he could capitalize on the Spawn universe. And I think that's where a lot of people got confused. As a whole, I'll give you guys my 2 cents on this entire situation. As I said, I think McFarland will probably lose a line. I think they may allow him to keep something here and there. There's a possibility that even like Spin Masters loses the opportunity to make, those small little 4-inch like semi-articulated action figures, and then just Mattel like takes over everything that's DC related. I think there's a very strong possibility for that. And as I said, we'll do another video talking about what McFarland does moving forward. But just in my opinion, I don't love this. I will say, I know there are a lot of people that just absolutely love the idea of having a 1/12 scale action figure line for the DC multiverse, because they just love the idea of crossing over their Marvel universe with their DC universe, which I just don't get. I don't think aesthetically they fit with next to each other. I just don't think that they're like a cohesive mix. I just think that they should be separate. You should have, displays for each individual line. Now, you can do whatever it is that you want in your display, but that's just my 2 cents. I don't necessarily need a line to be one specific scale. I think they should scale within that line, but I don't think that other line should be similar to each other, because at the end of the day, every line is doing, or every manufacturer is doing whatever it is that they feel fits their fan base. And so for McFarland to go with the 1/10 scale, I know a lot of people hated it, and I probably would have preferred a 1/12 scale, to be brutally honest with you guys, but it wasn't a deal breaker for me. I never criticized him for that. I did criticize him for not scaling within his own line, having Batwoman or Catwoman be as tall as Batman. That really kind of used to grind my gears back in the day. But in terms of like them scaling with Marvel Legends, I never had a problem with it. It wasn't a big issue for me. McFarland's going to do whatever it is that he feels is best for his consumer base, and as long as he's giving us quality product, I think that's irrelevant. So I don't love the idea of Mattel picking up the line, especially because McFarland gave us a decent array of action figures. Like within the last 3-4 years, he's done some absolute bangers. Yes, there are some shit stains here and there that just I wish didn't exist, but as a whole, McFarland did hit the best that he could within his abilities. And I'm just really sad to see this. Now people are going to have to like reboot their entire collection, and let's play around with the idea that McFarland does lose the license. And let's play around with the idea that they decide to relaunch the DC multiverse with new collectibles. Maybe they're going to redo everything that they were doing back in the day. I just feel like most of us already have like a decent established DC multiverse collection from McFarland, and all the issues that he has, and yes, he does have quite a few. A lot of people don't love that soft pelvic area. A lot of people don't like that ab articulation. They want hinges for their articulation. I've heard some really bad things about people complaining about the butterfly joints, for example, or the neck articulation. But at the end of the day, I just feel like so overwhelmed thinking about the fact that we could have to refresh our entire collection. Like, we may have to move away from the DC multiverse from McFarland because they're not going to scale with the Mattel universe. I doubt that they're going to move over to the 1/10 scale when they've always been known for a 1/12 scale manufacturer, and that's probably what they're going to give us. And so I'm a little bit sad. Now, I do like the prospect of being able to like refresh the entire universe and get something from a completely different perspective and get something new and innovative and something that we're going to get excited about. But at the same time, starting over again there's just no way. And I think there are a lot of people that, even though they weren't big fans of McFarland, they're just going to be extremely sad at the just sheer amount of money that they're going to have to spend again to try to revamp up their entire collection, especially for people that, like myself, who didn't really have a Mattel DC Multiverse collection. Now I'm gonna have to start, if I decide to jump in on that, I'm gonna have to start all over again. And there are plenty of people out there that are going through this. They're going through all the emotions of seeing McFarland lose the DC universe here. So all in all, I think everybody loses in whatever scenario, but I feel like ultimately the best situation would have been to allow McFarland at least a couple more years, allow him to kind of finish out what it is that he's doing right now, because we're starting to get some really deep cuts. We're starting to get some phenomenal body molds, like, some of the wired capes for some of the action figures like Batman and Superman. That's starting to really be innovative. He's starting to give us some great accessories, great extra hands, extra head sculpts. Like, I feel like now we're starting to get to the peak of McFarland collectibles, and yet they're taking them away from us. And honestly, I'm really sad about the situation. And by the way, I actually remember a little bit of those Mattel action figures back in the day. The articulation was awful. Like, I'm actually sitting in front of, a Cyborg movie action figure from the Mattel universe, and they're really bad. It's like single jointed elbows, single jointed knees, like no ab articulation. These figures were horrendous. As much as you want to criticize McFarlane, and yes, they're pretty old by today's standards, but still, I'm not too excited at that prospect. I'm hoping that if Mattel does take the DC Multiverse line back, they actually do it justice and like pour some heart and soul into it. But only time will tell. I think we've seen this we've seen the writing on the wall now for a few years, especially hardcore collectors. We saw McFarlane picking up the Marvel statues. We saw him doing the page punchers. We saw him doing some other little sublines, kind of like hinting or planting the idea that maybe even if he loses most of the license, maybe DC would allow him to keep some of those sublines, maybe the page punchers, 4-inch page punchers, maybe he continues doing the Marvel statues and then he works more on Spawn. So I think all of that kind of like hinted at what was happening. I think he was kind of like preparing us mentally, even though I don't think we could ever be fully prepared for something as massive as this. But this is just my personal humble opinion. As I said, I'm definitely going to make another video where I talk more about McFarlane and what he could do in the next couple of years after he loses the license and what to expect from him. It's also worth noting that, as I said before, Mattel's engineering wasn't all that great. The articulation wasn't great. Have they improved on that? Will we see more improvements from the DC Multiverse line? Or will they build on something that McFarlane was already doing, like maybe the Page Punchers line, for the 4-inch Page Punchers? Maybe they follow up on what McFarlane was doing or build on it rather than just tearing it down and starting from zero. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Do you guys want to see a little bit more of what McFarlane was doing? Or do you guys just want to see a refresh to the entire universe? Are you sad about it? Are you excited for the Mattel DC Multiverse collectibles coming at you guys? All of this is just like, it's really exciting and fun, but at the same time, really sad. It's also worth mentioning from this article, it appears that they have the license all through 2025. So I'm kind of wondering what he's going to do here towards the end. Is he really going to pour any effort? Is he going to continue to try to give us new body modes? Or is this it? Is he just going to like re-release action figures, just add wired capes and do kind of like the monotonous, routine? Or is he still going to try to like pour some love out and show some appreciation to the DC Multiverse fan base right before he kind of exits? I think it's important that we have like a good perception or a good mental image of how McFarlane decided to end the DC Multiverse line, because at the moment, I think it's a little bit mixed, mostly positive, but there's a lot of criticism on him. And I think the way that he decides to handle this like last year, I think is very, very important. And I'm very excited to see what he has in store. Is he going to ramp it up? Is he going to finish it off with a bang, or, just go out with a whimper? Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Stay safe out there. And as always, make sure to enjoy the hobby. That's the most important part of all this. Pose your action figures. Enjoy them. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.